I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the campfire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Tom, would you like to make an announcement before we get started?
Yes, I would. I want to thank our new Patreon members. Welcome aboard. And some people have wondered where they can see their names. We, on YouTube, in the description, all the Patreon that we have, we give them a shout out in the description. And so if you want to go to the next level and become a strategic partner with Creek Devil, that helps us to help you. You can do that. You just go to patreon.com/Creek Devil, or if you're watching the show on YouTube, in the description, there's a link. You click it and you just follow your nose. But all that aside, we want to hear from you. We'd like to hear your questions, your encounters. So send those to questions@creekdevil.com. But the comments, absolutely comment away on the show. And that helps us a bunch. Click the like and subscribe if we've done something good that you enjoy, and share it with friends. So that's a long-winded way of me handing the mic off to Will.
You know, you made a good point, Tom. Something we talked about on the last Q&A, and that was about the hair color of these creatures. And you know, I never really thought that much about it. I mean, I thought about different hair color because people always ask, but didn't really think about the differentiation, why, you know, Sasquatches have different, you know, there's a range, you know, black, brown, cinnamon brown, gray, white, you know, why there's that variation among these things, but not so much, let's say, among other primate species like chimps, gorillas, etc.
You know, that's right. And that was something that was the obvious, you know, hiding in plain sight right there in front of us. Forrest brought that to our attention last week. And as the Brits would say, I was gobsmacked. I was like, you know, that's right.
See, that's the one plus of having a qualified anthropologist on the panel, is because she spots things the rest of us wouldn't, or maybe not think about. The glute muscles, that was a biggie. You know, when you look at the Patterson film, it's got a big backside, and that's why it's able to stand upright like we do. Same with humans. But now the hair color thing, the hair color thing also.
The fact that they're a primate, and yet they're also at the same time their own species, to have the different hair colors they do, like we do, that makes me wonder how close their DNA actually is to ours.
Well, you could back the train up on that too and say, well, okay, if these are a really old species, the other primates that existed that are extinct now, was that a common thing among primates in ancient times? And maybe humans and these creatures are the only ones that have that variation today. What do you think, Forrest?
Well, strangely enough, in the wilds, when you're dealing with non-domesticated animals in the wild, they all seem to have commonality in color. You know, your lions are all certain colors. Yeah, you do have lucanism that shows up, and albinism and stuff, and but it's rare. You do have that periodically show up in primates, but it is rare. But it seems to be fairly common, and I don't know why I didn't think about it. It just occurred to me when I saw what I did here at the house, and I thought, well, that's weird. I haven't seen that color before here. Where did that come from? And it suddenly, I mean, like I said, I was sitting here watching true crime on TV, and then all of a sudden it just occurred to me, wait a minute, why does Bigfoot have a wide variety of colors, and you have that in humans, but you don't see that in other primates. So I'm not saying that I'm the Einstein of anthropologists, because I certainly am not. But
you make good observations.
Well, yeah, I made observations, but the thing is, I'm wondering, why hadn't anybody else thought about this before? But I don't know. Maybe somebody thought about it, but they never voiced the opinion. I don't know. But anyway, you know me. I like to talk. So,
well, now there's a couple of things, though. I mean, number one, it must have had an advantage somewhere in their history of the species. Same with us. And secondly, I don't think a lot of people out there. It kind of highlights the lack of in-depth thinking on this topic. Not to have noticed it before.
A lot of anthropologists don't want to get into it because they're afraid that it's going to damage their reputation. I mean, I guess I've just always been one of those that, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. But, it doesn't hurt my feelings to say what I think. And it's I've always been of the opinion, too bad if it hurts your feelings. But, I kind of go back to the convergent evolution. We are finding out now that apes and monkeys actually did show some evidence of bipedalism, maybe not complete bipedalism, but that they were evidently showing some evidence of it in the fossil record. So, it's been there. And so it's not hard to believe that Bigfoot as a great ape could actually develop in that manner. And, it's not unusual with the theory of convergent evolution that they may exhibit different types of hair coloration as well. So that's where I go back to. And then, like I always say, I could be totally wrong. And at some point in time when somebody, convinces me of otherwise, then I will say, hey, I was wrong. Yeah, I'll go with your idea.
Yeah, it might have been a much more common thing among primate species, because we don't know. The fossil record's really incomplete. They do know that there were at least 6 or 7 different ones that existed simultaneously at one point, and maybe that was a common thing among primates at that time period, and it's not today.
Well, you don't. I mean, the only genomes that they have really and we're talking about humans, we know really next to nothing about primate development as such from the fossil record. They're just now starting to find a lot of fossils, and a lot of it is up in Europe and the Middle East where they're finding these fossils, and it could be for the simple fact that it's easier to preserve the fossil record in those areas rather than the jungles, because things just tend to deteriorate in the jungle quite rapidly. But with that to be said, we don't know what the genome is on these things. You can't tell that because fossils are basically bone that's turned to rock. So, I mean, Neanderthals, we've just now been able to develop a DNA structure for them, and they're working on it with the Denisovans. So it's not an easy task. So we're not going to get. I don't think we're going to get anything from the fossil record as far as for monkeys and possibly apes. And I think I told you all on the last show that they just discovered here recently a fossil chimp.
For the first time.
I mean. Yeah, for the first time. Up till that point, they had absolutely no record for chimpanzees nor gorillas.
That's why we talked about that. If those species would have gone extinct suddenly for whatever reason, a couple hundred years.
We'd have never known they existed.
Yeah, a couple hundred years from now, people would say, well, how do you know those existed?
Where was it discovered? The chimp fossil?
When were they?
No, where?
Oh, God,
what was the...
the
Oh no,
location.
that's what. No. I'm not. No. I'm not
Uh-oh.
putting you on the hot seat. That was just a.
Oh, yes, you are, Tom.
No. It's a point of
Well,
curiosity.
yeah,
It was
you
just
are, because I just read the article here just about 2 weeks ago, and I'll be honest with you, I've forgotten. I want to say it was in Tanzania or what. They've changed the names of all those countries over there. I mean, I don't even know where half of these countries are now because they've given them all new names. I'm like, and I've never been to Africa and have no intention of going there. But
Okay.
I
looked it up.
think it was
It's Kenya's East African Rift Valley.
Okay, well, that would make sense there. Okay, the Rift Valley. The Rift Valley's been where we've discovered actually a lot of the hominin fossils. So, Lucy was found there, and it's just it's a hotbed for primates in that area, and I think it's because of the particular type of climate, and it's just been very conducive to preserving fossils. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if a monkey goes and falls dead in the forest, in the jungle, that body is decomposed, and jungles tend to be acidic in the soil and such. And those bones and that biological material is gone.
That's the same with the kind of forest we have here in the northern parts of the world.
I was just about to say, yeah, we're very acidic. And so that's nothing in North America.
And with weathering and the geology changes quickly over time.
Well, yeah.
Well, guess what, guys? Climates have been changing over time. So I know that we're kind of in that too many people in that frame of mind thinking that, oh my goodness, climate is changing. Guess what, folks? It's been doing it for eons of time. It didn't just start in the 20th century or the 19th century. So get over it. It's been changing for eons of time, and you could have rainforests at one point in time in one area, and that's how we kind of come up with some of the fossils, and then it changes to a very dry climate, and a lot of times that preserves the fossils better. So,
Yeah, I guess you'd have to have something that died and was covered quickly and in just the right conditions at the right time period.
Oh, yeah, they find that with dinosaurs all the time. It has to be covered fairly rapidly because, let's face it, if you got scavengers running around, they're going to see a dead dinosaur or a dead whatever, and they're going to go, oh, look, dinner's on.
You know what? And especially if that dead dinosaur is a T-Rex, and they go, him. Never liked that thing in the first place. This is my chance to get even here.
And hey, it tastes like chicken.
Right? A big fat chicken.
Did you guys see? I saw something not long ago. It's kind of off the topic of Bigfoot, but they were able to do studies tracing from chickens and connecting them to theropod dinosaurs, T-Rex, etc. That they're basically an offshoot of those species.
Yeah. And
look at crows.
Us mammals are getting back.
Right.
That's right, getting back, eating all those dang chickens.
Barbecue chickens, yeah.
Throw a little
Well,
T-Rex.
I love my chickens, but I hate to admit it. I like to eat chicken too, but I could never eat one of my own chickens. I'd starve to death.
Well, look at some of the birds of not that long ago. There's the dodo. That was one of them. But there's another one. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was a terror bird. Lived down in South America.
Oh, in Australia.
Yeah, and it was huge. It could run 70 miles an hour all day long. I think that's how it went.
Didn't they say those died out like between 10 and 30,000 years ago?
They're gone.
Well, actually, I think
I'm glad.
I think they actually live longer than that because there seems to, if I remember correctly, I think that there was stories within some of the primitive people down there that that were created, and they sounded a lot like that particular type of bird. I mean, I wouldn't let that thing I mean, they were huge and they were vicious looking, and I wouldn't want that thing running me down.
Well, when you look at the way birds eat, you can imagine something that big would be, kind of the same behavior.
Oh, yeah.
No thanks. I don't want my chicken that aggressive.
Well, I think these things could actually run down horses, and then
sure.
one snap, they would snap their neck with their beak.
Well,
That's
they were
not
small.
good.
They were the small horses. They weren't the ones of today.
Yeah, whatever. It was something bigger than me, and it could just bite it and snap its neck.
That's like, well, that's like a Sasquatch could run you down that quickly and snap your neck. So, I don't know. What do you want to be chased by, Bigfoot or a terror bird?
Well, I guess if they end it quickly, I guess it wouldn't make any difference. If death comes quickly, I guess that's the best way to to go.
I mean,
but
we do.
I really don't want to go anytime soon.
we do hear about Bigfoot playing with its food before they kill it. So,
oh dear, that's kind of like a cat. Well, you're talking about them chasing down what they call the dawn horse, but you know that the horse is the only thing that we have a complete fossil record on. Strangely enough.
Yeah, one of my professors in college, that was her specialty, was the little horses when they first began, and she was pretty sharp about all that stuff. It was really interesting.
Yeah, they kind of look like tapirs, is what they look like, and actually, they say I think the tapirs might be related to the horse, if I remember correctly.
It's interesting, kind of off track from that. I watched a lot of videos, and I was watching one on chimps. And they were showing these chimps, group of them, apparently had killed another chimp and they were eating it. And what got me thinking was, I thought, well, how tough, hunting elk and deer and bear and stuff like that, growing up, how hard it is. And, we butchered our own cattle and pigs and stuff, how difficult it is for humans. So I think we put ourselves, to break those animals down, even using tools. I mean, I remember one time we had a steer that was really big. And they'd killed it, and my dad and his friends and gutted it and skinned it, and they had it hanging up, and they had to use a chainsaw to cut its spine. It was so thick. And I thought, well, how in the world would a Bigfoot be able to tear something like that apart? But then I watched these chimps, and they one of them grabbed the dead one's arm and just ripped it off. I mean, like it was nothing. Like Tom, like we see the broken trees. It snapped that arm just like those trees are 90 degrees over and ripped it off and was eating it. I thought, holy cow, if chimps can do that easily, then these things obviously can do the same thing.
I feel like to get
for a toothpick.
It was crazy. I mean, it kind of brought it to home thinking about it.
I would like to do a call out to any mechanical engineers out there on the breaking strength of a typical Doug fir, or it could be a hardwood, like a oak tree, 3 to 4 inches in diameter. What's the breaking strength of that? How much effort is required to snap it over like that? It's because if you grab a dry broomstick and try to snap it over, good luck with that. And then you quadruple that.
Well,
it's just not going to happen.
As kind of a side note, it makes me think about when we did last week's Bigfoot breakdown, and they talked about it, Jacko only being, what was it? I think it was under 5 feet tall or around 5 feet tall and 127 pounds. So it wasn't real big, but it could grab a stick and twist it and break it. They said no way that a man could. And we've seen that in the forest so many times. And I always think, holy cow. I mean, think of the strength it takes to do that. If it can do that to a tree, probably with very little effort, after watching the video about the chimps eating another chimp, I thought, man, that's a tremendous amount of strength.
Didn't TW have an account a number of years ago where there was a situation on Mount Rainier where a team had to go in and neutralize 2 Sasquatch, and one got away, but they shot one, and I quote TW here as best I can, and Dummo went over there to see if the one that they shot was actually still alive or not. because he thought it was dead. And in a nanosecond, it tore his arm off. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, I mean, that's just like, the video of the chimps. They were just, and they were sitting there very casually eating this other dead chimp. And like I said, when they were sitting down, it just grabbed the arm, the forearm, I believe it was, and just twisted it over really quick and ripped it right off. I thought, holy cow. I mean, when you think about the muscle and tendons and everything and the bone itself, that's pretty tough material, and especially with chimps because they're extremely strong and always using those muscles. And to be able to do it with that little, at least apparent effort, was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that connective tissue is very, very strong.
So we see it with these creatures doing it to trees. We get people who have seen the creatures killing animals. You remember that we had I think, was the guy in Texas that got surrounded, they were deer hunting, and then a group of creatures came up and they were killing all these deer, or they weren't killing them, they were hobbling them by breaking their forelegs. And then they came back after and collected them up.
Yeah, he was a 15-year-old kid. They had a pond some ways away from in the backyard, and he would go out there in the evening and fish. And that's where he saw that. And this thing would come up and it would just snap the legs of the deer. And it would be screaming in pain and terror. And then it would run off and do the next one. And, I think the next one. Yeah. Boy, oh boy.
Well, look at the reports that we've had with the wild hogs with their heads being ripped off. I mean, that takes a lot of strength to do something like that.
Yeah, we've actually got a picture that Joe and Walter took in East Texas of one. Well, they didn't see the creature kill it, but they found this, and it was a big hog with the head completely gone.
And it was dismembered without tools.
Yeah, I mean it was the head was removed. And if anyone's out there ever tried to or worked around butchering hogs, that's tough. You got to cut that off. It's not something you just snap off.
And they don't just sit there and patiently wait for you to rip their head off.
No.
They're pretty vicious. So I don't know it'd be interesting to know what the story was behind that, but it's Bigfoot 1, Hog 0, that's for sure.
Well, and we talked to Randy in Canada, who was the moose hunter, and one of these creatures stalked and killed a moose right in front of him.
Yep. Yeah, and that was, boy, that guy couldn't get into his truck quick enough.
I would be right with him. He was thinking he might be next. So remember he said how he tried to get out of the area, and he did, of course, but pretty scary stuff if you think about it.
Yeah, and you don't want that truck to have a situation like you guys did where you're sitting there trying to get the keys in, trying to get it started.
I was thinking about that the other day, me and John and his brother Jeff. That was so funny. We think it's funny now because we survived it, but it was funny.
Right.
At the time, it wasn't so funny. It just reminded me of that scene of the movie Poltergeist, where they were trying to escape the house and they were fumbling with the keys and everybody was in terror. That was us. I'm sure it's probably where they got the idea for that scene in the movie.
Well, I think that's why, when the two times that we've gone up to that area up here in Oregon, we combat park, because it's a dead end. It goes up about a mile and then it just turns into a trailhead turnaround. So we park the exit way.
Well, you
if
have
you
to
need
think
to,
that way.
you can leave quickly.
Yeah, I've learned that the hard way over the years. If you don't plan your escape and a quick escape, you might not escape. So, you want to think about how you're going to get out of a bad situation should it arise.
Well, I think Wynn, he's not with us anymore, but Wynn on the Flathead Reservation had a situation like that where he was like, he's on his radio, he's on his phone, come get me now. Yeah, and for him, it was like 200 yards. He went up a couple hundred yards, turned around. He's like, "Oh man, I got to go back." And luckily, by that time, the thing was gone. But
well, yeah, he drove right by it. The creature was standing right next to the road he was on, and it was an oh crap moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember he called me right after that happened, or maybe as it was happening. I said, I think you need to get out of there quickly. You might be going into a trap.
Right, right. And I think we've avoided traps a minimum of 2 times. There may have been I think there was a third time,
right,
where we left in the nick of time.
Well, it's one of those things, when in doubt, get out. and
Right.
I'm serious about that because, a lot of times your gut feeling is exactly the right thing you're supposed to be doing. So instead of trying to think it out, there may be no indication something's going on, but if it just doesn't feel right, I would say leave the area just out of a safety concern.
Totally. Because by the time you realize this is a bad situation,
it could be too late.
Yep, exactly.
I think that's the sixth sense that kicks in with us, just like my event that I had down there at the lake that night. I mean, I knew we were in trouble if we didn't get out of there. And I think that happens to a lot of people who go out there and are pretty, they're pretty aware of their surroundings. And all of a sudden you get that feeling that, hey, you need to go. You're in trouble if you don't. And I think that happens a lot.
It does.
I'm going to
go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to comment on that. I'm still in a situation, or I'm still in the mindset of, I don't understand the mechanism. If they're going to come and get you, if they're a predator and they're out to get you, why do they give you like a heads up? Hey, you're in big trouble. This is just me kind of thinking aloud.
You mean in terms of them doing something that might give you an indication that they're present or they don't want you there?
You get a vibe. Yeah.
Well, if they're going to let you know, here's the thing. It goes right back to what we talked about before. Any kind of an altercation in nature could become a death sentence quickly. That's why predators go after the young, the old, weak, etc. They're not going after strong members of a species if they can help it, for that exact reason. And I think with a lot of times with humans, well, if you get a sixth sense, they're not letting you know they're present. That's just something you're picking up on, and I still think it's you're picking up, microscopic sense, from the creatures that's telling you, hey, there's something here that you don't want to be near.
Yeah, you're getting some sort of a premonition of danger, and I
think it's physical. I think we're actually picking up some kind of scent. I mean, that stuff goes out much more than we think it does. You might not consciously be aware of any kind of a smell, but the particles are in the air.
Oh, like a pheromone or something?
Yeah, pheromones or whatever. Whatever. I mean, if you're in close proximation to one of these things, they're probably giving off just enough to where, people are always saying, oh, well, human sense of smell is worthless, blah, blah, blah. They're always comparing us to dogs. When I took my neurobiology courses at WSU, they talked about that stuff. And they said that, yes, a dog can pick up because they have that long snout and they have a lot more nerve endings that will pick up on minuscule particles. But the dog's brain can only identify a dozen or so specific scents, that they'll know exactly what it is. A human can identify more than 50,000.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the one time that my wife and I were at that spring that you and I were at, the team was at, and there was 150, I took a laser rangefinder later, it's exactly 51 yards in front of us. I just had a weird vibe. It wasn't that premonition of danger or we need to get out of there, but it was just a real sense of creepiness. But I didn't get the sense of we need to get out of here now.
Well,
I think that's because I'm thick-skulled or something.
Well, and then our hearing plays into that. How many times we hear very minuscule noises that the recorders...
all the time.
And there were things the recorders picked up that we didn't hear. And
yes,
also,
you betcha.
And also it goes back to, remember I mentioned, I think on the Q&A we talked about, I saw this on Swamp People. that show where they were talking about they were way back in an area where people hadn't been in many years, and there was this particularly large alligator in there. And the guys, the hunters, they were commenting about how silent it was back there, and the fact that they knew that when there was a big predator in an area, everything goes dead quiet. So I think that's in us somewhere, because of our socialization in this, created environment we've made around ourselves. A lot of people aren't in touch with that, but when you experience it, it's still part of our being.
Yeah.
Well, guys, you guys remember that, it wasn't very too long ago where we took a video camera and a drone fly over where I had my first encounter, and we videotaped it and all that. And while we were there, a pumper showed up, and the pumper that showed up, the first thing he asked us when he came up to us was, "What are you guys doing? Looking for Bigfoot?" And we were all like shocked that he would even say something like that. And he tells the story of when he was in the same location that I had been, from my previous encounter there from a long time ago, and had the same kind of experience that I did. And his words to us was, I had this feeling and sense that I wasn't welcome there, and I had to leave. And he hurried up with his job and got out of there. It was the same kind of sixth sense that I think people have sometimes when they get into a situation like that.
I think it's something that's ingrained in our, I don't know if it's in our DNA or what, but or some kind of memory, just like other animals, all other animals, even insects. When those big predators, they talk about them big predators are in an area that everything knows, and they just go silent. And I think it hits us too. We just don't want to recognize the fact that we have that also.
Forrest, you've had that happen to you, haven't you, on the ranch, where you've had a vibe, because you've had more activity there than just about anywhere else, anybody else on the show. And I thought I'd heard you say at times you just get this feeling.
I was going to ask her about that too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jessica and I both have noticed that on occasion, and then like when that night that we smelled that smell, it was like it just, when we smelt it, it was like it hit us both just simultaneously. We need to get out of here, and I think that there's, just like y'all were talking about pheromones and stuff, I think that we do pick up on some pheromones. Primates don't have the greatest, and that's pretty much universal amongst all of them. They don't necessarily have the greatest sense of smell, seriously. But I think it's just something that predators, of course, you got the big cats and canids and stuff like that do rely a lot on scent, and they're predators as well. But it seems that we have this beautiful stereoscopic vision, and we can see in colors and stuff, and that's a lot of your other predators don't have that. So I guess sometimes we've lost some senses and they've been replaced by others. So, but yeah, we've had that happen here. And it's just a kind of a feeling that comes over you, like, okay, we need to get in the house, and it's happened on several occasions. So, and we've gotten where both of us know, follow your instincts. So I'm not going to question it anymore.
And how many times?
Forrest, I got to say,
how many times have we heard it from people, Tom?
Always. So many times. It's right up there with, I think that's even more common than the foul, noxious odor that people, it's just part of the, it's part of the experience with Bigfoot, is the vibe that people get. It just, it's very common. So I was going to ask Forrest, you sent us a footprint the other day of somebody else in Texas. And I thought that was kind of encouraging in the sense that, because for the longest time, it's like you cannot be the only person in Texas who's having, or in your neck of the woods in Texas, who's having this problem. And lo and behold, somebody else. Now, I forgot to ask you, did they send you the picture, or how did you get that picture of that footprint?
Well, the gentleman that came over and did some fence repairs for me, we had I had told him not to stay out too late over there because where he was at was over near the stock tank, and I didn't want him out there after dark. So I told him, I said, don't stay out here too late. And we told him why. And he was the one that that picture had been sent to him. And it was by another guy that was doing fencing down in South Texas somewhere. I don't know the exact location, and I asked him if he knew, and he said he didn't. He said they didn't tell him, but that they had found that, and it, I guess the gentlemen were Hispanic, and they were quite, it frightened them. It frightened them a lot. So they were just like, what kind of human has a foot this size, you know?
Well, the dimensions are wrong for a person because they're so wide, especially at the arch. It's almost like there's no arch.
Yeah, that's not a human track.
No. Well, I know that, you know that, but I don't think at that point in time, I'm not sure they knew that. You know, you can't expect. A lot of people might see tracks like that sometimes and think, oh, it's just a big person. So there may be a lot of prints that go unnoticed or unphotographed.
Well, I can tell you that
because people think, well, that's just a big person, but they don't necessarily know the qualifications that makes a Bigfoot print different from a human print.
Well,
so I mean, the average person's going to know that.
You remember my telling you guys back around 2005 or so. My brother-in-law and I were down in the Bluff Creek area, and the reason we went down there was basically to look for tracks. That was some project I was working on at the time. And we were there for probably, 6-7 days. And one evening we stopped to get something to eat. And my brother-in-law says, well, now exactly what does a Bigfoot track look like? So I told him dimensions we were looking for. And he says, I think I saw some of those. And I said, where? Well, near the Carbon River in the Puget Sound area of Washington State, they took out a lot of the railroad lines, the old ones, and they put walking and bicycling trails there. I think there's like 126 miles of them currently. But and I used to walk the one, and out near a place called South Prairie Creek that I learned to fish in as a small boy. He was riding his bike, and he saw this. He assumed a father with a couple of kids. They were kind of playing in an area that was off the trail. It was kind of muddy, and there was some water and stuff there. And he saw these footprints, and he assumed it was the man's footprints. And I said, well, as soon as we get back, I want you to take me out there and show me. So we went there, and sure enough, these were 14-inch footprints. They were Sasquatch tracks. And I found more than 100 prints there. And he says, wow, that's pretty big. I guess that wasn't a man's track. But it would be easy to misidentify something like that, especially if you're not really interested in the topic. You give it a casual glance. And what your brain does is, whenever something comes in front of you, your brain's always answering whatever it is, making sense of the world, right? So they see something like that, 2 + 2 = human footprint. Okay, file that away, it's gone. Off to the next thing. Chuck, you ever have anybody mistake footprints that were Sasquatch for human tracks?
I can't remember of anything like that. I do remember when not long after I had my first sighting and encounter, I started going on to a river area that a friend of mine, her family had a big piece of land there, and I was allowed to go out there and kind of look through that area. And she told me a story of her dad and her were going out to check the cattle one day, and they found her dad, or she saw this great big footprint at the gate where the gate was. And she asked her dad, "What is that?" And he went over and with his boot and put dirt all over it and said, "Oh, it's nothing." And I think her dad actually knew what it was when he saw it, but he just didn't want her to know what it was.
Yeah, I think that happens more often than we know about. I know when we talked to Annabeth, who's not really all that far from Forest, initially, I don't think that she thought those were Bigfoot tracks. And when we looked at the film footage, because she went back for me and videoed the tracks, and looking at her footprints and the Bigfoot tracks, the assumption was it was a juvenile. So the initial thinking was, okay, it's in human range size, until Alan went there for us and he measured the tracks and did all the step stride calculations and all that stuff and counted the prints, and they were also 14-inch tracks, so they clearly were not human, and the shape and everything was wrong too.
I think a lot of people, when they see a track like that, they dismiss it for being human track instead of a Bigfoot track. And if they actually knew a little bit more about the species and what these tracks look like, I think there'd be a whole lot more tracks out there that people would see, and we'd find more tracks like that.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I said about my brother-in-law. You get most people who either don't know anything about the topic or they're disinterested, and they see something, it's a casual glance, their brain says, okay, human, off onto the next subject, and it's forgotten, so I think you're exactly right. I think there would be a lot more out there if people maybe took a second glance at something and said, well, that doesn't quite look right, or it's in the wrong place. Let's say it's,
I think a lot of,
I was going to say,
I think a lot of people dismiss it for the simple fact that they don't want to even ponder the idea that there's something really out there.
Yeah, it can't be real.
Because, some of this land out here, you've got sandburs and everything else, and people don't put that into the situation. If they find a track like that, they don't think about what's actually there, and they dismiss it instead of thinking, well, this could be something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, you don't think about, well, okay, let's take a bare human foot. Is it going to be in that circumstance? I was going to use the example of snow. That's the first time I saw footprints as a kid. When I was 14, we saw footprints in the snow. And you have to think, okay, well, it's really cold. I think that day it was super cold that day. And you're thinking, okay, it's too big to be a human, really. It looks human, but it's this cold and it's in snow, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It just, those kind of things don't add up.
Think about the times when tracks have been found, but then rangers have also found them, and they basically swept them over. Didn't that happen to you one time, Cuz?
Oh yeah,
a line of tracks.
Oh yeah,
found,
yeah. There was.
And the rangers came out and erased it.
Yeah, I got a call from a couple old timers when I was living in Vancouver, and I worked with the son of one of the guys, and they, he knew what I did, so apparently, they were up scouting an area. What they weren't supposed to be. It was in a gated off area by the Forest Service, but they made Bajas out of VW bugs. And these two old retired guys, took off through the timber with this beetle they'd converted into a Baja. And it was great. That thing would go anywhere. And they got back into the system of roads back in there. And this was north of Goldendale, Washington. And that dirt on those roads was just it was like flour. It was so powdery, and it was probably an inch or two thick in most places. And they were driving down the road slowly, looking for deer tracks, and they found these. They were juvenile. They said they were maybe 4 or 5 inch long footprints, but they were clearly bipedal, and they knew that it wasn't a human up there, that it was probably a very, very young Bigfoot. So they found miles of these tracks. And on the way in, they talked to this young guy who was apparently a college student doing a summer job. They had a water truck up there, and I suppose in case, there was any kind of a fire. But he was thinning trees out, stuff like that. So they talked to him for a bit before going into there. So when they came back out, and this was interesting, there was a Forest Service truck there, a guy in uniform, and he said he was a Forest Service supervisor. And he chatted with the two guys, and then they told him about these footprints they found. And he says, oh, where are they? So they told him how to find them. And they said he took what looked like a very expensive-looking camera out of the back seat of his truck, and he said he was going to go take pictures. And he told him, he said, and they actually gave him a card. He said, if you want copies of the pictures I take, just give me a call in a couple weeks, and you can have pictures. So they went down and contacted me, and I took off from work, and they took me back up there. So we took the truck up there, and it's a fair drive. You're talking probably half hour, 45-minute drive one way. And we got to where the Baja was. We got in that. We took off through the timber. So they had tied a rag around one tree on the right side of the road to mark where the beginning of the footprints were, where they first found them. And when we got there, there were no tracks. There was nothing. Now, prior to getting to that spot, there was all kinds of footprints. I still have photographs of bear tracks in that beautiful soil, just to show how good it was. And you could tell, and I learned from fighting forest fire, and then I've, worked heavy equipment since then, and one of those things I've done is run a water truck. And you can spray with the water truck and pretty much wipe anything out that's in that kind of material. And I figured out that's what they had done. They'd gone through there and wiped out the footprints. And those two guys tried getting hold of that Forest Service supervisor, and when he called the number was legitimate, but there was no such person.
There was a similar incident back when I was down in the big thicket. There was a duck hunter that found a trail of tracks going through the woods, and he reported it to the rangers. And it wasn't a couple hours later, they had a bulldozer down there and just bulldozed all over the tracks and got rid of the tracks.
That's crazy,
isn't it? I think a lot of that, yeah, it is crazy, and I think a lot of that happens. They're trying to, cover up the trail.
Now I remember Renee Dehinden telling me back, when they were in the Bluff Creek area in the '60s, and the road crews up there would find tracks pretty often. And on one particular trip, and obviously the road crews aren't going to stop working, they found some tracks. They called probably John Green. So Green and Dehinden went down, and it takes a day or two to get down there. If you're going from British Columbia, depending on how often they stop and when they get started and everything. Renee said that by the time they got there, of course, the road crew, again, they weren't going to stop their work. They weren't going to cover up or protect any of the tracks. But he still said, he looked at, they said, well, the tracks had gone down the main road they were working on and then dropped off on this, I think, a spur road, he said. So he went down there, Renee did, and followed these tracks. He counted 997 tracks in one day. And that's after the road crews had wiped out the majority of them. So, but in those days, they weren't doing it on purpose. It was just because they had the contract to get the work done in a certain time period. But these other ones, what's the reason for doing it today, especially in places where they're not doing any work? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think they know, is what I think.
Somebody knows. Tom, what do you think? He's not muted.
We lose Tom?
No, he's there.
Do I have to unmute first? I didn't know that. There was a button here blinking. Yeah, no, that's happened to us 2 times, and I've gone into ranger stations, and I love the rangers. The Forest Service, they're great people. And they've always expressed, remember last summer, they expressed a great interest in what we were doing. And, oh, be sure and come in and let us know what's going on and all that sort of thing. Gosh, we had a guy here in May, and he even cast a track, and it was really big and all that. And I don't doubt that for a second. But we had that incident where something clanged on the side of the excavator, and the next day, my brother went out there in just after dark 30, and the excavators were gone, and the ground had all been. You can't really sweep that stuff, but it had been. I think they had taken the Caterpillar with the either the blade or the scoop. I don't remember what it had.
The front end loader that was parked there.
Yeah, and leveled that whole ground so you couldn't see anything, because there was a lot of spots that had some nice mud, that didn't have the duff on it.
The person I'd like to talk to is the person who found those tracks and cast one.
Exactly.
Didn't they say that was just somebody casual that was a local up there, maybe?
Yeah. That's what it was, just some guy. And what I would love to see is cast some tracks, take all the notes about, whatever you want, location or whatever you're comfortable with, and make a copy of it and bring it into the Forest Service and say, this is yours. You can post it. I wonder if they wouldn't take that extra step, no pun intended, and mount it on the wall. They should. They really should, because that would.
I might bring them.
Who knows what kind of information they get.
Bring them a couple of casts next time I come through there.
Copies.
Yeah, copies. Of course, copies. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of people that go out and make things like that. Unfortunately, I've had people who. I've been in contact with that have made casts, and they're like, oh yeah, we talked about trading copies of casts, and I send them copies of what I have, and I never hear from them again. It
was crickets. I remember that.
Yeah. That happens. It's more about me, my own personal collection is what I collect. I'm not, showing them off or anything. It's just my own personal collection. But, I don't mind sharing, but it has to be reciprocal if you're going to share something.
Especially when you say you're going to do it.
Yeah. But that's kind of the way things are with people. So, but it's interesting that, people do find things, that you do cast things. Now, why? I haven't heard of anything lately where anybody's covered anything up. That was, that experience was in, let me think, would have been the early 90s, probably around 94. So, that particular time. And, it's interesting. There was a parallel situation that happened just due south of Mount St. Helens, right around that same time period. I took my field team I had at the time up to a place called the Eagles Cliff Store and Campground, and when you're driving that highway up there, that's kind of the northernmost point where there's anybody at, kind of in the circuit I would make. And Kevin, who was the owner of the store at the time, I stopped and I said, hey, anything new? And he says, yeah. He says, you just missed a Forest Service biologist. I said, oh, what's going on? And he says, well, some locals up here. And he says, I know the people, they're very trustworthy. Found a line of tracks up on this creek this morning. And he said, this biologist was going to go up there and take a look. So we took off up there, supposedly only 30 minutes or so behind this guy. And we got up there. There was no sign of this person, no vehicles or anything up there. And we split the team up. One part of the team went downstream, the other went upstream. Both sides of the stream, we searched all over, no footprints anywhere. And so I went down to the ranger station, and some friends of mine, an older couple, they lived up there in exchange for doing security, for the Forest Service and their equipment and everything. And I asked them about it, and they said, well, let me call the office up here, and we'll talk to the rangers and see who this person was. And they said, well, there had been no biologist. There was nobody from their office that had gone up there. There was no biologist. They said anybody from outside the area would have to check in with them first. And they said there was nobody up there. So this biologist didn't exist. and the supervisor over in the eastern part, I think that's Klickitat County. So east of Skamania County, that person didn't exist either. But yet there were 2 lines of footprints, both wiped out.
Who was it that came by? And I think you were there, Cuz, and they came in and you told them not to go, and they went anyway.
Oh no, that was a Yakult. That was hilarious. And for people who haven't heard that story, the Yakult thing went on for 9 months that we were there. And there was stuff happening all the time, and people seeing the creatures constantly. And, we found tracks, we heard things. There was just lots and lots of stuff that went on there. So one night, right around dusk, I met a couple of my members of my group there, and we were just going to stay out. We were out on the road in front of the Goldhammer home, and we were just going to monitor for a couple hours and see what was going to happen that night. And we seen this car coming up from the town of Yakult coming our direction. And I thought, oh, that's, somebody else who said they may come up. And it wasn't. It was this little blue Porsche, and this man and woman get out, and they have their little packs that they were putting on their backs, and they were going to head up the hill. And I told him, I said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And the guy says, oh, I'm a biologist. I know what I'm doing. And over the fence they went, up the hill into the dark. And I looked at my friends, Don and Carol, and I said, well, they'll be back in about 20 minutes. And sure enough, just like clockwork, we stood around, we were listening and talking quietly, and we see these flashlights that were bobbing furiously as these 2 were just tearing down from this uphill slope above us, coming down through the timber. And they just about killed themselves getting over the barbed wire fence. The guy threw his pack over, the woman, she got over and fell down, and then he gets in the Porsche and he fires it up. Her door is open. She's still halfway hanging out, and then he peels around really quick, and they take off. And my friend Don, he looks at me and he chuckles. He says, well, you call that one right on the money. So the creatures were coming down off that mountain in the evenings. We'd hear them every time. They'd usually be screaming and vocalizing and things. And these 2 went up there when they were coming down and apparently run into them and scared the heck out of them. And they never came back, as far as I know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to interview those people and say, so, what did you guys run into up there? You're in a big hurry to leave.
And apparently you soiled yourselves very quickly.
Right.
Well, we've only got a couple minutes left. Anything else, guys, you want to bring up?
Well, the last thing, just something on my mind, was that so-called biologist for the Forest Service. How is it that they're going to have access to Forest Service vehicles, credentials, and all that kind of stuff, not check in with the office, or ostensibly not check in with the office, and they just drive? Who are these guys that they can just drive in, be very amicable, get the information, and then they have the authority to call in a truck to erase the prints?
Well, with the water truck, I think the guy was in uniform. Everything apparently looked legitimate. The guy with the water truck was just a summer temporary employee. He probably just saw the guy, in uniform and badge and was told what to do. I'm sure he didn't.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I just think it just sounds like he's the guy with the badge was very nonchalant.
Oh, sure.
And had the comfort and the authority to pull this off. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, both those situations were very interesting. I haven't run across anything like that since, but yeah, it was very, very interesting. And it was interesting. It was right at the same time period. I don't recall if it may have been the same summer. I don't remember for sure, but it was pretty close. Well, does anyone have anything? We're just about out of time, folks.
I'm just waiting for my stupid cough to go away.
That's always a plus.
Yep.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap then. Thanks for joining us around the fire, everybody. If anybody wants to sit in with us and chat, get a hold of us, and you're more than welcome to join us. So having said that, thanks for stopping by, folks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.